Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." So Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" She replied to Jacob, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear on my knees, that I also may have children by her." She then gave him Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her. Thus Bilhah, Rachel's handmaiden, conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged me, and he has heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. Now Rachel's handmaiden Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "God has helped me, and I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. Now when Leah saw she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah her handmaiden and gave her to Jacob as wife. So Jacob went in to her, and Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "Good fortune." Thus she called his name Gad. Now Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "I am blessed, for the women will call me blessed." So she called his name Asher. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. Thus Rachel said to Leah, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" So Rachel said, "Not so. Let him lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." Now when Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night. Thus God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has given me my wages, because I have given my handmaiden to my husband." So she called his name Issachar. Now Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will choose me, because I have borne him 6 sons." So she called his name Zebulun. Afterward she bore a daughter, and called her name Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her, and opened her womb. Thus she conceived and bore a son, and said, "God has taken away my reproach." So she called his name Joseph, and said, "The Lord shall add another son to me." Now it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away, that I may go to my own place, and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know the service I rendered you." Then Laban said to him, "If I could find grace in your eyes, I would seek for it divinely, for God has blessed me by your coming." So he said, "Name me your wages, and I will give it." Jacob replied, "You know how I have served you, and how numerous your cattle became with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming. Now therefore, when shall I also establish my own house?" Thus Laban said to him, "What shall I give you?" Jacob replied, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your sheep. Let me pass through all your flocks today, removing from them all the gray sheep, and all the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and gray among the sheep, will be considered stolen, if it is with me." Then Laban said to him, "Let it be according to your word." So he removed that day all the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had some white in it, and all the gray ones among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar, and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, tearing off the bark. So the white strips he had peeled appeared on the rods as spotted. Then he placed the rods he had peeled in the gutters of the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so they should conceive at the rods as they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth speckled, spotted, and ash-colored speckled. But Jacob separated the male lambs, and placed a speckled ram before the sheep, and all that were spotted among the male lambs. Then he separated for himself flocks by themselves, and did not mix them with the sheep of Laban. Thus it came to pass, whenever the sheep conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the sheep in the gutters, so they might conceive according to the rods. But whenever the sheep had already given birth, he did not put them in. Thus it came to pass, that the unmarked were Laban's, and the marked were Jacob's. So the man became exceedingly rich, and had many cattle and oxen, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys.